What's wrong? What are you feeling? Tell me.
Clamp. I got pressure in my head.
This video is tough to watch.
I need to see, baby. I need to record you so I can show him.
My head. Oh, I need room.
Will the air help you?
Oh, yeah.
Leroy Torres has been suffering from episodes like these since his 2007 deployment to Iraq.
Like somebody has a vice in my head.
Every day he needs supplemental oxygen. It's all part of what he calls the war that followed him home.
It's a different type of war, but it seems a lot scary because it's invisible, and it takes a toll.
Leroy has been diagnosed with a toxic brain injury and a rare lung disease he says he contracted at the base in Iraq, where he lived near a massive burn pit. It's an open-air pit where the military burns its waste.
It was plastics, the styrofoam cups, medical waste, body parts, military vehicle parts, and so forth, tires. So everything that was thrown away was pretty much burned.
In this video, taken in Iraq in 2005, the dark plume of smoke from the burn pit appears to blanket the base overnight. On a day-to-day basis, the smoke from this burn pit would be filtering through camp.
By the morning, you can actually, the stench was worse in the morning, and you can actually see the soot outside your housing unit. I would just rub it over the little AC, and you could, just like ash.
Torres experienced respiratory issues and says the clinic in camp gave him antibiotics, but they did not help, and the issues followed him back home, where he resumed work in the Texas State Patrol.
He began having a coughing spasm and couldn't breathe, and his airways were restricting, and then ran to the bathroom, and he collapsed. And our boys, like, they're in middle school, and we're like trying to pick him up.
I started missing work. I report to work one morning, and my sergeant says, "Hey, you're sick. So you can't come back to work until you have answers. There's something wrong with you."
Every time we went to VA or a DOD healthcare facility and came back with, "We don't know."
What did you think was wrong with you?
Honestly, I felt that there was something wrong with my lungs from exposure.
And the VA said what?
They said they couldn't do the lung biopsy.
In 2004, at the request of the Department of Defense, Dr. Robert Miller, a pulmonologist at Vanderbilt University, examined over 250 soldiers who had come back from Iraq with unexplained respiratory issues. He performed a lung biopsy on over 100 of them. What did you find?
Surgical lung biopsies showed a number of things indicating toxic lung injury. The findings included scarring of the airways, either bronchiolitis or a condition called constrictive bronchiolitis.
And this to you, these findings suggested this is something that you get through inhalation?
All of these findings were compatible with toxic inhalation.
Of the 100 soldiers that you have biopsied, how many had toxic lung injury?
All of them.
Every single one?
Every one.
See that inflammation right there?
Despite the fact that the VA did not recommend a lung biopsy for him, Leroy Torres paid out of pocket for Dr. Miller to perform one.
I was diagnosed with the constrictive bronchiolitis and with fibrosis of my lungs. There was a lung injury associated with toxic exposure.
These soldiers have returned from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they are facing all sorts of pulmonary problems, they believe, related to their deployment in burn pits. What do you say to them?
I don't have any doubt that the patients that we have diagnosed with toxic lung injury have that as a result of their deployment. I also don't have any doubt that the problem is much bigger than the number of people that we've evaluated at our institution.
I am here with Rosie Torres from Burn Pits 360, and we're just going to have a pretty quick, brief conversation.
Leroy and Rosie Torres agree. They started an advocacy group, Burn Pits 360, and have enlisted doctors, vet-owned companies like Grunt Style, and celebrities like Jon Stewart to get people's attention.
DOD and VA don't collect the proper data, and then they put out a study saying, we can't help you, we don't have enough data.
We asked the VA for their data regarding how many vets have filed burn pit-related claims and how many have been approved. They have not answered. Data obtained by Burn Pits 360 through the Freedom of Information Act says that of the 10,588 burn pit disability claims filed between 2007 and 2019, only 22%, or 2,360, were granted disability benefits.
My name is Wesley Black. I was a Vermont Army National Guard soldier. I did 2 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wes Black served as a combat infantryman, a gunner, and a sniper.
I was not afraid to die in combat, but I came home, and after I was medically retired, I thought my time with everything in the military was behind me. I thought I had made it.
He received a Bronze Star with Valor and a Purple Heart for his service.
There was a massive burn pit. It was a couple football fields in size. I mean, it was absolutely massive. And I remember during that deployment, breathing in this smoke and feeling choked up. You know, like it was very difficult to breathe at times.
Black took this photo of that burn pit in Iraq in 2005.
Some of the things that were burned in those burn pits are carcinogens. They are absolutely carcinogens. Plastics, metals. We can't burn that stuff here in our country. In 2017, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. It has spread to my liver and my lungs. And I was given anywhere between 2 and 5 years to live.
When Wes initially filed a claim for disability benefits with the VA due to his colon cancer diagnosis, he was denied.
They treat it like it's not related to something that is so clearly evident.
The VA found that he hadn't established the causal connection between his colon cancer diagnosis and his exposure to burn pits.
The scientific evidence doesn't exist. It's on their website. It says that the VA says, oh, there's no scientific evidence correlating burn pits with any sort of medical issue.
But an internal VA document issued in 2010 references the toxins found in burn pits and the adverse effects each have on various parts of our bodies, including the GI tract, which for Black connects it to his colon. Black went to the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute for a second opinion. There, the oncologist who examined him concluded that Black's cancer could have been detected sooner if further investigation had been done earlier, and that, quote, it is likely his cancer was caused from Mr. Black being exposed to burn pits in Iraq.
And once he garnered that type of evidence, he was able to have his disability claim ultimately approved.
Black is suing the VA for medical malpractice, and he alleges that the government has fraudulently concealed the risks of burn pit exposure from veterans.
I don't want another vet to have to go through what I've gone through.
We're trying to flip the script and put the burden back on the government to defend the position that they've been publicly taking for years, forcing them to come back to us with evidence that shows that these burn pits actually don't cause long-term adverse health effects as they've been claiming on their website for over a decade.
Typically, a veteran suffering from deployment-related illness files a service-related disability claim, and that claim is either approved or denied based on evidence that the disability happened during service. And as Congress has mandated, the veteran should receive, quote, the benefit of the doubt. But now some are saying the VA is making it too hard for veterans to show they're entitled to benefits for claims relating to burn pit exposure.
They're looking for proof, absolute medical proof, that a certain exposure caused a certain disability. You're not going to get it. It's not how the epidemiology world works. It's not how the claims process works.
Kerry Baker served as a Marine for 11 years, then as chief of the legislative and policy staff for the VA. He now works in the private sector on veteran claims related to toxic exposure. In 2010, he helped write the policy for the Veterans Affairs on how to handle complicated issues like toxic exposures and burn pit claims. But Baker says the VA is not following that policy.
The fundamental issue, in my opinion, is right now, as of today, you've got a decent set of instructions on how to adjudicate these claims. That if VA was to follow that and just that, a lot more of these vets would get better decisions and fair decisions and correct decisions and would not have to go through this appellate process.
It seems like the U.S. government and the Veterans Affairs is saying, okay, you've served your country, you were in Iraq and Afghanistan, now, years later, you're back in the U.S. and you're saying you're sick, but you got to prove to us that it's related to that burn pit. Is that what's happening?
In a lot of ways, yes. VA is shifting the burden that they have to develop that case properly onto the veteran, and they have to develop it properly. It's not supposed to work like that.
We asked the Department of Veteran Affairs for an interview. They declined, but the former VA Secretary David Shulkin agreed to speak with us. He says the problem goes beyond the individual claims process and that the system needs an overhaul. What was your position on burn pits when you were the Secretary of VA?
Well, the burn pit issue was really just coming to the attention and recognition about what was going on. And the initial response back when I was in the VA from 2015 through 2017 was, let's make sure that we understand this issue. Let's make sure that we collect data to be able to make the right decisions. And the big issue that we had just...
So if you go to the VA website, they say, at this time, research does not show evidence of long-term health problems from exposure to burn pits. VA continues to study the health of deployed veterans. Do you agree with that?
I do not agree with that, and I've called for the VA to remove that from their website. It is not only inaccurate, but frankly, it's insensitive to those who have served to go when they seek help and they read a statement like that. There is clear data and published peer-reviewed studies that show that there are adverse health consequences, most of them respiratory, but that have demonstrated the relationship between burn pit exposure and poor health. And what's worse than not helping somebody and telling them that you're not going to help them is holding out false hope.
Many of the veterans who served in these post 9/11 wars with prolonged exposure to burn pits say this is their generation's Agent Orange. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think that that is the case. For 3.5 million of our veterans who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, there has been documented burn pit exposure. Now, not all of them, fortunately, are suffering from adverse health consequences, but many of them are. And that's very similar to what we saw in Vietnam, where it was not intentional, but it was clearly a situation that we exposed our military to, and we as a country have a responsibility to deal with that.
The commonality between this generation's, we call it this generation's Agent Orange, compared to the Vietnam era, it's like history repeats itself.
What is there an easy fix to this?
Yeah, I do think there is a fix to it. First of all, I think we have to be much more aware of the adverse health consequences, both physical and mental.
The VA needs to treat our returning service members better by taking care of them, by doing early screenings.
The answer is you give the veteran the benefit of the doubt rather than make them suffer, or worse, never get the help that they deserve.
And I really want people to know about this, the injustice of it all. Because my family, my 4-year-old son, has to grow up without his dad.
It's the price of war. It's huge. It's huge.
John Stewart, how did you first become, we've seen your work with 9/11 first responders and all the help you've given them. How did you turn your attention to veterans in burn pits?
A woman named Rosie Torres, who had worked with a group, she founded a group called Burn Pits 360, reached out to John and I. She had reached out because there were a lot of analogous situations with what burn pit sufferers had been experiencing that 9/11 responders had been experiencing in terms of toxic exposures. I mean, the item that sort of blended ground zero with these burn pits. They used jet fuel to burn all of the materials that were created by these army bases, and hazardous materials and batteries and armaments and all sorts of other things.
Right now, the situation seems to be, from all the people that we've heard from, is that they try to get their disability claims approved through the VA. They're having a heck of a time getting them approved, and they're having to pay out of pocket to get their diagnosis. Is that how you understand it?
Basically, you have all these soldiers that are, and generally it's a community that's pretty stoic, but if they come home and they're suffering from a certain health condition, well, they've got to go before these medical boards. They've got to be their own advocate, lawyer, doctor, scientist. And what the VA says is, okay, you were in Balad, which had a 100-yard by 100-yard burn pit. We know these are the dioxins and cancerous causing chemicals and particulates that were there. It was burning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You were downwind of it. Now you have constrictive bronchiolitis. You don't have the breath capacity to do the job that you normally do, but prove it. Prove it to us that that's why. And it's unacceptable. And, they made a commitment to us and stepped into a theater of war and went downrange on our behalf, fighting for our freedoms. And when they come home, we treat them as though that is disposable. And yet we stand up and applaud them at football games, and we say thank you for your service, and we give them 10% off on appetizers at Chili's, and we think that that's enough to honor their remarkable service. But it's not. And we do this in every war. I mean, there are Vietnam veterans still fighting for Agent Orange benefits.
John Fiel, tell me about the parallels between your work on 9/11 with first responders and what you're seeing with veterans with regard to burn pits.
The comparisons are scary, because the same thing that happened to 9/11 responders is happening to these soldiers. If I pump jet fuel into your beautiful little room right there that you're sitting in, and in a year from now you got cancer, it's presumptive that jet fuel made you sick. It's that simple. But, for them now to say they don't have the science, we have the model. The 9/11 community has the model. NIOSH, the CDC, has the model to prove that jet fuel and other toxins compatible to what happened in the Mideast with the burn pits made men and women sick. The absorption through the nose, mouth, and skin.
It seems that the government has known about this issue for years. I mean, they asked doctors to look into it as early as 2004 and to see what they've come up with. And yet here we are, it's 2020.
Right.
16 years later. Why do you think that is?
It's simply a case of money and urgency. When we need them, it's the most urgent. When was the last time a defense appropriations bill didn't pass Congress? When was the last time a defense contractor wanted to build another toy and didn't get the $1.5 trillion funding over 10 years that they wanted to get for it? When was the last time we ended a weapons program because it was obsolete or outdated or wasn't going to do anything? We don't. But when was the last time we expanded our care for the veterans, for the soldiers that have gone to war, for the after effects of that war? We always have money for war. We never have money for the warfighter. This is the pattern since the revolution. What was the first, after the revolution, what was the first rebellion in the United States? It was veterans who were saying, hey man, you said you were going to pay us. Is that coming, or what are we doing here?
Do you think this bill that's in Congress right now is the answer?
No legislation is perfect.
Yeah.
If you can find me the perfect bill, then you would have 330 million happy Americans. We believe our piece of legislation will help the most people affected. Any piece of legislation that creates a program at the federal level, there are going to be people that fall through the cracks. But it's going to be our job as advocates after that legislation's passed to ensure that those people left behind get picked up and put into the program, and we will advocate them. We're still helping 9/11 responders get into the World Trade Center Health Program or file a claim with the Victims' Compensation Fund. While we're trying to change the culture of Washington, D.C. and the DOD and the VA, hopefully our message spreads across the United States where others get involved in this fight, whether they're celebrities or those in the media that are going to help these men and women who come home with post-traumatic or missing a body part or burning from the inside from burn pits. We all, every single one of us, have a responsibility starting now. It's that simple.